today to have the principal investigators of another subproject that's funded by the John F. Templeton grant to Patrick McNamara and I on the brain basis, basically, of religious behavior, the cognitive neuroscience of religious behavior. And today, we're pleased to have three Italian investigators who are going to talk a little. They'll introduce yourselves as you begin to talk. Just say a tiny bit about where you're from and your affiliation, and then tell us a little bit about your project, your sub-project. So Angela, maybe, do you want to start, Angela?
Sure.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to thank both of you and the Cognition Neuroscience Religious Group for founding a project. And it's really, we are really excited about this project. I will talk in a few minutes with my colleagues. And so I am Angela Sirigu. I am a neuroscientist working in Lyon at the Institute of Cognitive Science, Marc Jeanneret. And my research has focused for many years on the sensory motor representation, consciousness, mechanism of consciousness, and plasticity. And more recently, I'm working on a big project on autism and the neural basis of this dysfunction. So, Irene?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm Irene Cristofori. I'm assistant professor at the University of Lyon, and I'm conducting my research here at the Institute of Cognitive Science, Marc Jeanneret, as Angela. My research is based on using mostly neurological model to explore cognition, social behavior, executive function, and I've investigated patients with epilepsy, traumatic brain injury, and brain tumor.
I'm Salvatore Aglioti, working at Sapienza University of Rome and at the Italian Institute of Technology. I'm trained as a clinical neurologist, but I became over the decades a social neuroscientist. Started to analyze the basic processes of interpersonal interactions, and landing close to this project, which is the highest level of sociality, which is the way in which we conceive the beyond.
So
it's fantastic. All of your English language skills are fantastic, and I'm ashamed to say I can only speak English, but so hats off to you guys, first of all, for fantastic language skills.
Thank you.
So go ahead, Jordan.
yeah, I was just going to say,
I interrupted you again.
That's all right. Angela, why don't you start describing a little bit the work that all three of you are doing, and then you can pass off to the different investigators.
Yeah, sure.
A little piece.
So, I mean, this is a collaboration between my team, Irene's team, that we are working, as we said, at CNRC, Institute of Marc Jeanneret, and with Salvatore Aglioti in Rome. And I think it's very, for us, it's very exciting to work together with Salvatore, and because he's a specialist of religious behavior, and Irene also, but I am the one that is the less knowledgeable person in this field. So I have a lot to learn. And that's why I am very interested in starting this project. So for many years, I mean, there is a huge already literature I found, contrary to what I was thinking at the beginning. There is a huge literature on religious behavior and religious belief. But when we started looking at what has been done so far, there we found many interesting results in the literature, but most of them, they were focusing on how religious experience, mostly the more mystical or transcendental aspect of this experience is represented in the brain. And we thought that could be this topic could be tackled from another angle, which is the angle of how sensory afference, how sensory information contribute to the experience of religious belief. And that's, I mean, what our project is about. We have two projects that I'm going to talk very generally. And the first, we want to address the question how visual information contribute to the representation of the supreme divinity, that is God. And this is across different religions. There is Muslim, Jewish, and Christian. The first question addresses the issue of how do we represent the God? What kind of a feature, the God that we think about, the God that we address when we are in pain or whatever, and when we want to pray, how is this God? How do we picture this God? And as you know, there are in the human brain and also in many animals' brain, we have the face patch area. And the question is how this face patch area is activated when we think about God, when we pray with God, and so on. So this is the first project. And we have another project that I will ask Irene to present.
Yes, the second project will be on VNS stimulation to see if this kind of stimulation can enhance religious perception. So this will be done with the binocular river task, where participants will be seeing again there will be participants from the three subgroups that we have cited, and we'll see if during the VNS stimulation there will be an announcement for images that are linked to religious symbols. And so this will allow us not only to see how VNS can modulate areas that are thought to be linked to religious beliefs. So we know that VNS has an effect on parietal structure, parietal mechanism, and we know that the frontoparietal cortices are responsible for our religious beliefs. So we thought that maybe the VNS could also enhance these visual features at the perceptual level. So
Irene, sorry to interrupt. By VNS, you mean vagus nerve?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
And so this will be a transcutaneous auricular vagal nerve stimulation.
I think, I mean, if I may add, is that here we really in this project we want to ask the general question: is religion is just a matter of mystic brain activity, or it's a matter of also feelings, God feelings in particular? Okay. Mm-hmm. So I hope that our project will bring something. So we collaborate, as I said, with Salvatore Aglioti, who is an expert in this field, and so I think Salvatore may tell us how he believes this project may add to the field of religion in neuroscience.
So many thanks to both Jordan and you, because of having aboard this kind of enterprise, but also thanks to Angela and Irene, because they kept me with the feet on the ground, because they, in a sense, gave the direction of staying close to the neural substrates of this phenomena. And they put not only the brain into this kind of general equation underpinning the spirituality and religion, but also the inner body. So one aspect which is novel is just that how this basic flow of information going on continuously and sending us info which we cannot explain linguistically, actually modulate a number of processes. Because in my mind, this would have taken a somewhat slightly different direction. And so I'm grateful to them because they're saying, oh, we need to stay at this stage within these limits. And so the possible detour, which hopefully we can deal with in the future, is that it's really at the roots of the concept of embodying everything, including the divine. So intuitively, the divine is something ineffable, right? So it's something which is somewhere between us and the world. But there is like a research line, which I personally feel in a sense affiliated to, has to do with this notion that the body is a psychic tool for us to negotiate not just sensory motor processes, but also social processes, and including this extreme level of sociality. And so in my mind, this project has this great potential of providing us with the building blocks in the sensory motor cortex, but also paving the way to something more complicated inherent to embodying a number of higher order functions. So this is one aspect which I feel is important, and it's related to what Angela and Irene put in this project, because as I said, I would have gone towards the ultra embodiment processes, which means that you go into another world, and this other world may be, well, dream, for example, which is something that cannot be treatable for the time being experimentally. But the other line is, which is easier, it's virtual reality. So just that you create this world which is more real than reality, and which has parallels with the way in which we conceive the beyond, the ineffable, and God, after all. This is one thing. And well, I don't want to keep going, but there are one thing I would like to add, and probably Angela will comment on this, that it's so important to consider this kind of, say, universal, which is the body, but this universal is into cultures. And so the idea is that mapping visually or sensory motorically God, it has to do with religions. And this is why, so in the project, there is the idea of having not only Christian, but also other religions. So maybe Angela wants to say something on this.
I wanted to add to the fact that what is important also about this project is that we will address the issue in 3 different religions. And for instance, the question now, how do we picture the face of God, whether if there is a face or no, but it's important because for the Christian, for instance, we have several pictures that represent Jesus. Actually, God has never been represented, but Christian usually they have an image of a saint, of a Jesus. But the other religions, such as Muslim and Jewish, is forbidden. Actually, it's absolutely forbidden to picture the face of God. Mm-hmm. And the question is, when you ask Muslim or Jewish to imagine addressing himself or herself to God, is it the activation of a face mandatory? Okay. Or are other general mechanisms that because there is an abstract representation, for instance, in their mind, there are other general mechanisms that can be activated when you ask, when the subject is given this instruction. So if also Muslim and Jewish are activated, because we are going to look at the activity in the fMRI machine, if the brain of these people are activated, we see activation of the face area. This means that even in their mind, God has a human, feature.
I predict you will find that, because
Yes.
I mean, even when there are theological prohibitions against anthropomorphizing God,
Yeah, exactly.
people still tend to do it.
So this means that is mandatory, right?
Yeah.
Well,
So,
And the religion is not an exception for our brain.
agreed.
yeah, so one of the problems, and you will have it too, I think it's unavoidable, is that even Muslims may have exposure to faces of Jesus or God outside of their religion. They may not do it within their formal places of worship or in their books or other places. So it's not like they haven't been, it's possible they might have been exposed. And by the way, even within Islam, there are certain sectors that do portray a face of God. We're just used to the overall edict that it shouldn't happen. Judaism, it's a little bit harder, it's true. But even Christians, though, do have, I mean, Michelangelo, right? In Rome,
Yeah.
the Sistine Chapel has
Maybe the
a
only one.
portrayal of God there.
Mhm.
So it does exist. So anyway, I think that's hard to control for prior exposure. I mean, you can ask about it. You can say, how often have you viewed artwork outside of your religion that portrays God, or is it relatable to the human who's most authoritative in their lives? So when they think of God, they may not, do they think of not maybe the exact features, but a facsimile of, you know, that person or group? That's beyond the scope, I think, of what you're looking at in this study, but it does raise questions. And you brought up one more thing, and then I'll let Patrick ask a lot of questions too. We know that dreaming, right, is a place where supernatural agents often appear. And we don't have a subproject, for example, that's looking at primates, non-human primates. They do dream. Do non-human primates dream of supernatural monkeys or apes? But there's no, well, you laugh.
No, but it's because I found it interesting. That's why I'm not laughing. I'm just smiling.
But we would not be able to, of course, to question them directly, but it would be interesting to see after dream states if they have different kinds of behaviors when meeting authoritative in their group, in their ape group, say, for example, if they're apes that have higher authority, if they relate slightly differently. Well, anyway, I don't want to go too far along there, but so far it sounds quite interesting, and I was wondering if Patrick had.
I do, yeah. Speaking of dreams, Salvatore mentioned dreams as well. I think it's a major advance in the field to start looking at vagal stimulation, and also, of course, the face area. I don't know why we haven't looked at the face area before. That seems like such a good idea. It's surprising the field hasn't gone there yet. So both aspects of this project, I think, are really innovative and needed. So that's great. On the vagal stimulation stuff, as you may know, I'm very interested in dreams and REM sleep. And one of the findings in the field of REM sleep that people are beginning to pursue is that vagal stimulation always induces PGO waves, and PGO waves recruit all the structures that are normally activated during REM sleep. So, I mean, that's one connection between vagal stimulation and the whole REM processing system. But of course, there's so much more important stuff related to vagal stimulation that's just a minor issue, but one that, you know, I'd be particularly interested in. But this whole theme of embodiment of the divine and of religious consciousness and of religious representations, I think is a great, very needed way to go in this field. And it makes sense that vagal stimulation is one of the best ways to do that. You said that vagal stimulation, that there, and I know that this is true, that there are dense connectivity patterns between the vagus system and the parietal lobes. Is that right?
Via the brainstem.
The study that you...
What happened with vagus stimulation? So there are the vagus nerve has both afferent and efferent pathways. 80% of the fibers of the vagus nerve comes from the enteric system. Okay.
Yeah.
And in the brain, the first relay of the first region when they arrive is the nucleus of the tratus solitarius.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
And it's a very deep brain region, okay? And then you have a spread of the activity of the influence of the vagus nerve stimulation in different regions, amygdala and prefrontal cortex, insula in particular. Insula
Yes,
it's a
insula,
good
yeah.
target.
Yeah.
And even the parietal areas. Now, the parietal area, we show by doing vagus nerve stimulation in a patient that was in unconscious state, vegetative state, that the area that is strongly activated when the patient regain some consciousness, sign of consciousness, is the parietal cortex. And exactly. And what is interesting, the parietal cortex has been also plays also a role in religious representation, as many studies. And I think Irene, you did
yes,
with
yes.
Jordan.
Irene's work, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. And yeah.
So that's, I mean, the idea was to enhance this type of representation through wide activity in the brain, in particular, because we know that the vagus activity target specific areas that are also involved in religious belief.
With stimulation of the insula and, well, not stimulation, but changes in insula activity, like lesions and other changes, are associated with out-of-body experiences, right? The insula in the precuneus.
Yes.
These are sites of multi-sensory integration.
Yes.
And changes that are associated with out-of-body experiences, so, you know, which is part of the quote-unquote beyond that Salvatore was alluding to.
More related to the connection with the TPJ, and it's exactly, for example, what we found in this patient study a few years ago, and that, I mean, when there is a lesion there, you feel more transcendent because you feel more detached. And this is exactly the same VOG cells are those which, if stimulated during surgical operation, induces out-of-body experiences. So this deep embodiment issue has to do profoundly with something which it's not just ineffable. If I may expand a little bit on this, on what you both asked, is when Jordan and you said that, so we have a problem, and this is important for us that you, I mean, highlight this. The problem that, for example, people are visually exposed to the image of God, even if they are Jewish or Muslim. So this is important, right? And this is also true. We have studies, for example, showing that if you are an atheistic in a Christian Catholic society, or are a Christian, a Catholic, you are influenced by the image of God. I mean, it's there. But this is why we believe, and Irene mentioned this, we believe that the second study in this project may be relevant, because there, in a sense, you detour the issue of exposure to vision. So looking at this subliminal influence that comes from the viscera, it's real. That can be the experimental cruises. that in one case you see the difference, in the other you not. So thanks for this remark, because I mean, you prompt us to think a bit of the fact that, so we're in trouble if we found no difference, but we probably have a level at which the difference will emerge. So thank you.
So some people are born without sight, and they can't see very well. This is an obvious extension of your thinking on the face area, because the face areas no longer have the role, at least we can say that their role in face processing from a visual point of view is minimized, as is the color area in the brain as well. We don't know necessarily what happens to that color region, what it becomes specialized for with lack of vision. But there are some studies looking at the face area being activated, even though faces cannot be reported in blind from birth. And I was just wondering if you thought that they might have a different form of religious belief, given that limitation.
You want to answer, Irene?
This is a very good question, George. I'm not sure. I think it should be interesting to investigate that, but I'm not sure about if the blind side could have different religiosity due to this lack of imaging God or imaging. Yeah, I'm not sure.
But I mean, I think it's an interesting question. Yes, and we know that when you have blind people learn a specific task, they can learn it through tactile stimulation, for instance. But what is interesting is that in this case, you still have the visual area that is active. Okay. It suggested that these people, they picture in their mind the shape of something, okay, and they can transfer into the tactile representation, but it still remains as a visual representation. We can call still a visual representation because it's the visual area that is active, right?
Well. I think that's unclear. I think that it is the visual area that's active, but it's active during Braille reading, for example.
Yeah, but it's not the somatosensory cortex that is mostly active. It's the visual areas in this case.
That's right.
As I remember.
You're absolutely correct. But the tactile process. Remember, I studied a little bit a long time ago, blind from birth. And I'm only talking about blind from birth patients, right? Those are the key ones. But in essence, reading was rerouted through those areas. Now that was our interpretation. So it wasn't so much a visual representation as a tactile form, then eventually to other aspects of language as it went through the typical both phonological and semantic roots for language. However, that you couldn't say that about the face area. Right. And most people who are blind from birth do not have the luxury of what Paul Baccarita used to do or other people do, where they put tactile stimuli on the tongue or on the chest to interpret visual stimuli, right? Not simply just reading from Braille, but to interpret visual stimuli. So there's a lot of other angles to this, but certainly they probably don't have a face representation that they can use when anthropomorphizing God's physical features in any way. So that might make them more akin to religions where they don't have that, and it's just an interesting feature.
Or maybe they'd be akin to people with certain forms of autism, who don't have good theory of mind abilities, and so they come up with different conceptions of God, less personal conceptions.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question about the vagal stimulation stuff? I don't know a lot about that literature, but I'm really fascinated with it. So when you stimulate the vagus nerve, I mean, I know that it's used to treat a lot of clinical issues. So when you stimulate the vagus nerve, what usually happens? I mean, to a person, you know, a healthy person gets stimulated, and what usually happens? I mean, is it just a lot of autonomic nervous system changes, or is there a sense of well-being, or I don't know a lot about it. So,
well, one thing I can say, and then I'll let the sub-project leaders talk, is that it's been consistently reported with vagal nerve stimulation, at least transcutaneously, that you develop greater connectivity between regions in a network. So one of the things it presumably does, if it leads to that, then there must be a behavioral, no doubt, a behavioral result of that. And you might even argue that gives you potentially greater cognitive control, right? If you have greater connectivity, it gives you more, in some sense, choices of behavior under executive functions control. So that's one thing that's reliable. But as much as it's interesting, it's not a huge literature compared to, say, TMS or direct current or alternating current stimulation. So presumably it's going to emerge. Something I found out, as an aside, I didn't know this until even last week. Apparently, vagal nerve stimulation is used extraordinarily frequently. It's part of the clinical evaluation during ENT type surgeries.
oh,
And the reason I became aware of that is because, and I don't think you'll have problems, but we are going to use vagal nerve stimulation in people emerging from surgery, and to see if it stimulates consciousness and wakefulness. But in doing that, the IRB was concerned about whether it could cause adverse effects, and did we have any evidence? And but eventually, one of our anesthesiologists on the project was in a surgery related to the neck, and they said, "Oh, we do this all the time. It's clinically done." So it may be used more widely, but people don't recognize it, nor are they studied in the same way we would study them. But that's just a safety issue. Anyway, go ahead, guys.
You want to say something?
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure, there are not many studies on healthy control. Most of the studies focus on the beneficial effect of VNS on clinical population in pain, reducing pain, depression, epilepsy, and so on. I mean, I think the effect of the VNS could be also to increase the silencing network. So maybe it could make
the salience network.
Yeah, exactly. So make some stimuli as more potentially relevant for what is interesting for individuals.
Also consider that what it's used for this study is based on very, very tiny stimulation. It's the auricular one. So for ethical reasons and for safety reasons, I mean, to stay on the safe side. Well, in some circumstances, but Angela may say more on this, you don't even feel anything. I mean, behavioral, so in a sense, subjectively, you may not feel anything. So and this is.
Does vagal activity vary on a circadian? Does it obey a circadian rhythm, or nobody knows?
I think not if you're talking about healthy volunteers being studied across a 24-hour span with transcutaneous vagal nerve stimulation. I don't think the data is.
No, just normal. Just, you know, does our vagal activity?
Oh, just its usual
vary? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
remember. Circadian basis.
You guys know that?
Yeah. Oh, I enjoy.
No, you can go ahead.
No, well, typically people try to stimulate at the same time when you run studies in the day, just because there are oscillations, which, I mean, there is not systematic investigation on this, but yeah, it's known that the system works on that basis. And so it's something that it's used. I don't know whether I can go back. So pragmatically, I'm always a little behind. I would like to go back to the issue that you raised before, which was very interesting to me, the issue of the changes in the fusiform or other areas. And because in blind, for example, because I think it's an example pretty much like yours, that can be done using the issue of congenital agenesis of pain sensitivity. So there are studies of empathy for pain in these people, and you see obviously they've never felt that pain, but the circuitry is somewhat different, but impinge on the areas which are the typical areas, say the pain matrix and the affective part of the pain matrix. So going back to what the prediction is that for religion, there may be something, if you are areas in a specific circuits that can be blunted in a way, like stimulating, interfering with that. And probably the higher order phenomena are, less, so they may be less interfered. And as a last comment, Sir Jordan, I do remember your nature studies. So it keeps me back to whole days, and so the impressive work. So, but there is a unimodal cortex. It's something rather simple in comparison to having this circuitry. So there is plasticity, which is absolutely inherent to the process, I believe.
I was wondering something that it's slightly off topic, but not off topic. So before I started these studies a while ago, looking at religious belief, probably I didn't pay certain attention to religious texts or talking to people who had religious beliefs about aspects of their belief or about aspects of the text. And I'll give you a personal example, and then I'll ask you I wonder if you're going to have a sense of that yourself. So as Patrick has educated me, for example, on the dream content relevance to religious belief, I've been rereading, for example, Genesis and Exodus. I try to reread it often enough because the Old and New Testaments and the Quran are sort of the basis of a lot of current practice of the three major religions you mentioned. But now all of a sudden I'm paying more attention to the dreams and their significance. And it turns out they were exceptionally significant and frequent, more so than sort of transcendence experience independent of dream stimulation. So that's something that changed my perception of what I was directly reading and exposed to. And I'm just wondering, if you haven't had that, I'm wondering if you'll find the same thing as you study. So the study of religion not only is an academic study, it also turns out to be a personal search as well, or a personal awareness of aspects of religion that you didn't contemplate before.
Yeah. Do we have to comment? Yes.
You don't have to comment on that. I'm just reflecting.
No, while I was talking, I was thinking that you are talking about dreams, and I wonder whether the experience of God could be like the one we have in a dream. When, for instance, when you report a dream, you see, I saw this person, but actually you don't know how to figure out this person, right? You know, it doesn't have a, you know that this person has a face, but you cannot see the face. Or you can focus on another part of this person's body, but I mean, there is no neat representation, image of what you saw in the dream, right? We can think that in religious belief, when you are talking with God, for instance, you perceive this kind of representation, but the question is, if we enhance it through vagus stimulation, is whether this image can be more neat, more clear to the believer. I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah.
Just out of the box.
Going back to, I think a comment one of you made, it is true now that in dream research, some investigators claim they can interact with people during their dreams and perhaps even understand the content of the dream that's occurring. And I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on how we could manipulate those dreams if they were supernatural dreams or not? I mean, would you be able to affect the later report of the dream content depending on how you manipulated it during often when dreams are reported in religious texts, there are not usually other people around. It's sort of the person is isolated somehow. You know, they're in the desert sleeping on something and they perceive a supernatural agent. But what we're talking about is now interfering with the ongoing dream. And I wonder if that was also done in ancient times as well to some degree, and we just don't know about it. But in any case, it is potentially it could be subject to experimental manipulations, at least in some people.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on lucid dreaming, and in fact, I'm pretty sure vagal stimulation has been used to induce lucid dreams. And you know, I could talk forever about dreams and religion, and I appreciate you bringing it up, Jordan. And you know, whatever relevance these two projects have for dreams, I'd be very, very interested in. But I know it's not about dreams, and we don't have to, you know, go there with this project. And I'm going to start to really read the literature on vagal stimulation, and I think the whole approach with the fusiform gyrus in the face area is, of course, wonderful and should have been done long ago. So I'm going to avidly look forward to seeing what results turn up there as well. But I think this whole area of vagal stimulation is going to really take off soon. And I mean, we already know it has these profound clinical effects on a whole range of disorders. So obviously it's a powerful route into brain and cognition. And so I need to start educating myself there, see what really is going on. I'm from my personal point of view, one thing that's going on is these PGO waves, but that's my own idiosyncratic interest.
Well, there's also, and I think Salvatore touched on this a little bit as well, part of your sense of state, your state,
Brain state, yeah.
your sense of your bodily state.
Yeah.
And we know that the vagal nerve can transmit information about your gut.
Yeah.
Right. And
there's a whole other nervous system there. Yeah.
Right. It's not by accident we say, what's your gut feeling about something?
Yeah.
So even and I'd be interested, we don't have to talk too much longer. You guys have done a great interview, but I was going to say, if one distinguishing feature of religion as a social process from other social processes may in fact be its affiliation with emotional processes,
Yeah.
that gives it that enhance its status as a social organization. And that's where potentially the vagal nerve stimulation could have an interesting effect on how people in an experiment, how people report their beliefs or how they're primed, or a variety of experimental designs that could take advantage of vagal nerve stimulation.
Can I ask one last question about the vagal stimulation stuff? So if we try to think about it in terms of the predictive processing framework, so if incoming sensory information is used to generate prediction errors, and then to update, cognitive models about what's going to, in expectancies, and the vagus, the VNS is central to that, like what kinds of sensory prediction errors are being propagated up the system in order to update predictive models and expectancies. Do you think that that work has anything to say about how predictive models are updated?
I think that that's really an important target. And in this sense, as you were saying at the beginning, Patrick, it creates a sensation of well-being, you see?
Mhm.
And I don't believe that it may increase the prediction error, okay?
Mhm.
But I think it's something that nobody has tested yet. That could be the next project.
Yeah,
Well, also, at least an aspect of religion is ritualistic. So the predictions of what follows or what's subsequent is quite strong potentially, right? In a ritualistic type social system. But there would be ways, obviously, to control for that. Not all religious beliefs or behaviors fall into rituals, but that might make a difference in terms of prediction errors and what circumstances they might be elicited. So it's all interesting.
Yeah, with respect to the Patrick's question, one important, because I think it's important to look also at the anatomy, you know, of the vagus nerve, the vagus nerve. I said before that it hangs in the brain in a specific nucleus, which is called the nucleus of the tratus solitarius. And from there, most of the projection go to the locus ceruleus, okay, which is the region where you have the norepinephrine system, okay,
yes.
Which is important for attention. So you have a mixture, you know, that of this of the vagus nerve that it contribute to regulating the emotional system, okay, and at some time it enhances attention. You see, so.
So I would say it should be a very powerful input into the prediction error. You know, it should be really powerfully influencing that whole system.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a good hypothesis to start with for another project, really. I don't think it has never been tested, actually, this.
If I may say something related
yes,
to this.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, yeah, going back to what Patrick, I mean, the way in which he framed the entire story makes very good sense. And it's not only related to this kind of, say, ascending projection, but also to a kind of, like top-down prior. For example, when you prime religiously a process, you become more tolerant to errors. So the way we have very good proxy to this, because you do see, for example, a change in the rhythms, which are so absolutely a kind of signatures, very reliable signatures. So in a sense, the idea is that when you make more comfortable, you get ready to expectancy, and you deal with this kind of a process of adjusting and retuning this sensitivity to error. So I think it's really interesting. So thanks for all these remarks. We were scared at the beginning a bit, right? Because we noticed that you do, I mean, you raised absolutely great questions, but also very difficult. So, but you helped a lot. So thank you very much.
Right. So part of the goal is not only to challenge you guys, but when people come to watch your video, they can see all kinds of other possibilities for themselves, if they're researchers, that they might take off on. And so I want to thank the three of you. I think it's a good time to shut down the interview to some degree. So thank you very much for showing up.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you to you.
Great
Thank you very
work.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Ciao.